This happened a few years back, when I was still young enough to think I was invincible and stupid enough to believe the road held no real secrets. I was doing long-haul trucking, mostly cross-country routes, the kind that take you through vast stretches of nothing. You know the ones, where civilization becomes a memory, where the radio turns to static for hours on end, and the only sign of life is the occasional pair of headlights going the opposite way, miles and miles apart, like lonely ships passing in an ocean of darkness. I was young then, maybe 24, 25. Fresh enough in the game to be eager for the miles, hungry for the money. The solitude didn't bother me, or so I thought. I'd grown up in a small town, used to quiet. I figured the empty highway would be my friend, my meditation. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. The route I was on that night took me across a long, desolate stretch of highway that ran between the borders of two large governmental territories. I don't want to say exactly where, partly for my own peace of mind, partly because I'm not entirely sure you could find it on a map even if you tried. Think big, empty spaces. Lots of trees. Dense, old-growth forest that hasn't been touched by human hands in generations. Not much else. No towns. No rest stops. Just mile after mile of asphalt cutting through wilderness that doesn't care if you exist. This stretch was notorious among drivers. We'd talk about it at truck stops, share stories over coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. It was a dead zone in every sense. No cell signal for 100 miles in either direction, no towns, no help if something went wrong. And it was prone to weird weather. Fog that would roll in out of nowhere, turning the road into a guessing game. Sudden ice patches even in seasons that shouldn't have them. Most guys tried to time their runs to hit it during daylight hours. But schedules are schedules, and dispatchers don't care about your superstitions or your comfort. Mine had me crossing it deep in the night, around the witching hour, as my grandmother used to call it. I remember the feeling as I entered that stretch. It's hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. Utter blackness outside the sweep of my headlights. Not the kind of dark you get in a city, where there's always some ambient glow, some reflection of human presence. This was the kind of dark that feels primordial, absolute. The kind that feels like it's pressing in on the cab from all sides, testing the glass, looking for a way in. The darkness had weight, had presence. It was a living thing. The only sounds were mechanical, man-made, a thin barrier against that vast silence beyond my windows. The drone of the diesel engine, steady and monotonous. The hiss of the air brakes now and then when the road dipped or curved. The rhythmic thrum of the tires on asphalt, a heartbeat that wasn't my own. It was hypnotic, too hypnotic. The kind of sound that lulls your brain into a dangerous half-sleep, where you're still technically conscious but not really processing anymore. I'd been driving for about 10 hours straight, with only a short break a few states back at a dingy truck stop where the bathroom smelled like decades of cigarette smoke and broken dreams. The coffee I'd bought there had long since worn off, leaving behind only a bitter aftertaste and a slight tremor in my hands. The dashboard lights were a dull green glow, comforting in a way, familiar, but also making the darkness outside seem even more absolute by comparison. Like I was in a tiny submarine, surrounded by an ocean of nothing. My eyelids felt like they had lead weights attached. You know the feeling. That gravitational pull toward unconsciousness that gets stronger with every blink. You fight it, you know you have to. You slap your face, hard enough to sting. You roll down the window for a blast of cold air that shocks your system, makes your eyes water. You crank up whatever music you can find that hasn't dissolved into static. Let the bass vibrate through your chest. Use anger or energy or anything to keep your brain firing. I was doing all of that, playing every trick in the book. It must have been around 2 or 3 in the morning. That dead zone of time when the world feels like it's holding its breath, when even the nocturnal creatures seem to pause and reconsider their choices. I was in that weird state where you're not quite asleep, but not fully awake either. Like your brain is running on low power mode, conserving energy, making executive decisions about what's important enough to process. The white lines on the road were starting to blur together, stretching and warping like they were made of taffy instead of paint. Standard fatigue stuff. I'd experienced it before. I remember blinking hard, trying to refocus my vision, trying to force my brain back into alertness. That's when I saw it, or thought I saw it. Just a flicker at the edge of my headlights, on the right shoulder of the road. Small, low to the ground, dark against dark. For a split second, maybe less, I registered a shape, vaguely human-like in its proportions, and then it was gone, swallowed by the darkness as my truck passed, relegated to the periphery, to the land of things half-seen and unconfirmed. My first thought, deer, or a coyote, common enough on these roads. Wildlife doesn't respect the boundaries we've drawn. They wander into our spaces, and we hit them, or nearly hit them, and everyone goes home with a story. But even in that first moment, something felt off. It hadn't moved like an animal. Animals react to the noise and light of a rig. They bolt, or freeze, or turn their heads, eyes catching the light like tiny mirrors. This thing had been upright. Still, my brain, sluggish as it was from hours of monotonous driving, tried to process the information. Too small for an adult human. Too still for an animal startled by an 18-wheeler. Then the logical part, the part that was still trying to keep me safe on the road, trying to keep me from doing anything stupid, chimed in with its reasonable explanation. You're tired. Seeing things. Happens to everyone eventually. Shadows become figures. Branches become arms reaching. Your pattern recognition software starts seeing threats that aren't there because that's what kept our ancestors alive when the night really was full of predators. And I almost accepted that explanation. I really did. It made sense. It was rational. I shook my head, like I could physically dislodge the image from my brain. Took a swig of lukewarm water from the bottle beside me, the plastic crinkling in the silence. Kept my eyes glued to the road ahead, to the white lines that marked the boundaries of my world. The image, though it kind of stuck, clinging to the edges of my consciousness like a burr. A small, upright shape, like a child. No way, I told myself firmly. Out here, middle of nowhere, middle of the night? Impossible. Kids don't just wander around on interterritorial highways at 3 in the morning. It had to be a trick of the light, a bush that happened to be shaped wrong, my eyes playing games with shadows and distance. I've seen weirder things born of exhaustion on long hauls. Shadows that dance and writhe. Trees that look like figures watching you pass. Faces in the patterns of roadside reflectors. It's part of the job when you're pushing your limits, when you're trying to make time, make money, make it to the next checkpoint before your body gives up entirely. IDR. On for maybe another 30 seconds, the image slowly fading from immediate consciousness, my rational mind starting to win the argument. Just a figment. Just fatigue. Nothing to worry about. Keep your eyes forward. Keep the rig between the lines. Stay alert for real hazards, not imaginary ones. Then, out of habit more than intention, I glanced at my passenger side mirror. It's something you do automatically after enough hours behind the wheel. Always checking. Always monitoring. Keeping track of your surroundings, your trailer, the road behind you. And my blood went cold. Not just cold. It felt like it turned to slush, like every cell in my body suddenly crystallized. There, illuminated faintly by the red glow of my trailer lights receding into the distance, was the reflection of a small figure. Standing, not moving, on the shoulder of the road. Exactly where I'd thought I'd seen something moments before. It wasn't a bush. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of tired eyes. It was small, child-sized, and it was definitely standing there, unmoving as a statue, as my truck pulled further and further away. My heart started hammering against my ribs like it was trying to punch its way out. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't hallucination. This was real. There was someone, something, back there. And it looked tiny, vulnerable, wrong. Every instinct I had, the ones honed by 20-some years of existing as a prey animal in a predator's world, screamed at me. Danger. Wrong. Unnatural. Keep going. Put distance between you and that thing. Trust your gut. But another voice, the one that makes us human, I suppose, the one that separates us from the animals that run purely on instinct, whispered something else. A kid? Alone out here? In the middle of nowhere? What if they're hurt? Lost? What if they need help? What kind of person are you if you just drive away? I fought with myself for a few seconds that stretched into an eternity. Time does weird things when you're terrified and trying to make a decision that might define you as a human being. The image in the mirror was getting smaller, fainter, retreating into that absolute darkness. If I didn't act now, they'd be lost to it again. Swallowed. And God, the thought of leaving a child out there, if that's what it was, if there was even a chance. Against my better judgment, against that primal urge screaming at me to just floor it and never look back, I made a decision. I slowed the rig, the air brakes hissing like angry snakes disturbed in their den. Pulled over to the shoulder, gravel crunching under tons of metal, the truck groaning in protest at this deviation from forward momentum. Put on my hazards, their rhythmic orange flashing cutting into the oppressive blackness like a weak heartbeat, marking my position as if anyone else would ever come down this road. Then, I did what you're never supposed to do with a full trailer on a narrow shoulder in the dark. I started to reverse. Slowly, carefully, my eyes flicking between the mirrors, trying to keep the trailer straight, trying not to jackknife, trying to relocate that tiny figure that logic said shouldn't exist. The crunch of gravel under the tires sounded unnaturally loud, like I was crushing bones. It too. A minute, maybe two, but it felt like an hour. An hour where anything could happen. An hour where I second-guessed every choice that had led me to this moment. The red glow of my tail lights eventually washed over the spot again, painting the shoulder in shades of crimson. And there it was. A kid. I stopped the truck so my cab was roughly alongside them, maybe 10 feet away across the shoulder. Switched on the high beams, hoping to get a better look, and also to make myself clearly visible as just a truck, just a person, not something else. Not a threat. The kid was small. Really small. I'd guess maybe 6, 7 years old. Hard to tell in the harsh glare of my headlights. They were just standing there, on the very edge of the gravel shoulder, right where the trees began. And the woods. God, the woods pressed in close on this stretch of road. Tall, dark pines and dense undergrowth that looked like a solid black wall just beyond the reach of my lights. The kind of forest where you could step 3 feet in and be completely lost. The kind where search parties never find bodies. The kid wasn't looking at me. That was the first thing that struck me as genuinely strange. They were facing sort of parallel to the road, just walking. Slowly. 1 foot in front of the other, like they were on a leisurely stroll through a park, completely oblivious to the massive 18-wheeler that had just pulled up beside them. Engine rumbling loud enough to wake the dead, lights blazing bright enough to illuminate a football field. They were wearing what looked like pajamas. Thin, light-colored pajamas that seemed to glow almost white in my headlights. In the chill of the night. No coat, no shoes that I could see. Just bare feet on sharp gravel, and they weren't even flinching. My mind reeled. This was wrong. So many levels of wrong. Wrong time. Wrong place. Wrong clothing. Wrong behavior. Everything about this scenario screamed that something was deeply, fundamentally not right. I killed the engine, my hand shaking slightly as I turned the key. The sudden silence was almost deafening, amplifying all the small sounds I'd been tuning out. The crickets in the woods, a steady chorus. The rustle of leaves from a breeze I couldn't feel in the cab, like the forest was breathing. My heart was still thumping, a weird mix of fear and adrenaline, and a dawning sense of responsibility that I wasn't sure I wanted. I rolled down the window. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and damp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth and something else, something older, like decay and mushrooms and time itself. It filled my lungs, replaced the diesel fumes and stale coffee smell of the cab. "Hey," I called out. My voice sounded hoarse, too loud in the quiet, like I was shouting in a library. "Hey, kid." No response. They just kept walking, one small, bare foot in front of the other, at a pace that was taking them absolutely nowhere fast. Their head was down, slightly, like they were watching their own feet. I couldn't see their face properly. Just the pale curve of a cheek, the dark shadow of hair. "Kid, are you okay?" I tried again, louder this time, putting more force into it. Slowly, so slowly it was almost painful to watch, the kid stopped. They didn't turn their head fully, just sort of angled at a fraction, enough that I could see a pale sliver of cheek in the spill of my headlights. Still not looking at me directly. Still ignoring the multi-ton machine idling beside them like it was nothing, like it didn't exist. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Not the normal kind of unease you get when something's mildly off. This was deeper, colder, more primal. It felt like ice water being dripped directly onto my brain stem. Animals act weird sometimes. They freeze, they panic, they do unpredictable things. But kids? A lost kid should be scared, crying, relieved to see an adult, something. Some kind of emotional response. This one was nothing. Blank. Like an animatronic that hadn't been fully programmed. "What are you doing out here all alone?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, friendly, the way you're supposed to talk to a scared kid. Even though this one didn't seem scared at all. Even though every fiber of my being was screaming that I should start the engine and go. It's the middle of the night. It's dangerous. Silence. Just the sound of their bare feet scuffing softly on the gravel as they took another step, then another. As if my presence was a minor inconvenience. Background noise they were choosing to ignore. As if I was the one who didn't belong here. This wasn't right. My internal alarm bells, the ones installed by millions of years of evolution, were clanging louder now, drowning out that human voice that wanted to help. My hand hovered near the gear stick, ready to slam it into drive. Part of me wanted to just floor it and get the hell out of there. But the image of this tiny child, alone in the dark, possibly in shock, possibly hypothermic, possibly dying. I couldn't just leave. Could I? What kind of person would that make me? "Where are your parents?" I pushed, my voice a bit sharper than I intended, frustration bleeding through. "Are you lost? Did you wander away from somewhere?" Finally, the kid stopped walking completely. They turned their head, just a little more. Still not looking directly at my cab, more towards the front of my truck, into the glare of the headlights. I could see their face a bit better now. Pale, featureless in the harsh light, like a porcelain doll that hadn't been painted yet. Small, dark smudges that might have been eyes, or might have been shadows. No expression. None. Not fear, not sadness, not relief, not confusion. Just blank. An unreadable slate. A mask. Then, a voice. Small. Thin. Like the rustle of dry leaves being blown across pavement. Lost. Just that one word. It hung in the air between us, carried on that cold breeze, and somehow it felt heavier than it should have. Relief washed over me for a moment, quickly followed by a fresh wave of concern. Okay, lost. That's something concrete. That's something I can work with. Okay, kid. Lost is okay. We can fix lost. Where do you live? Where were you going? Are your parents looking for you? The kid finally, slowly, turned their head fully towards my cab. Towards me. Towards where I sat in my little bubble of metal and glass and diesel fumes. I still couldn't make out much detail in their face. The angle, the light, something was obscuring it, keeping it in a sort of shadowy vagueness despite the headlights being aimed right at them. But I could feel their gaze. It wasn't like a normal kid's look, that open, curious, or frightened stare. There was a weight to it, an intensity that was deeply unsettling coming from such a small form. It felt like being examined, assessed, measured. "Home," the kid said, that same thin, reedy voice barely carrying over the distance. "Trying to get home. Right home. Of course." I leaned forward a bit, gripping the door frame, trying to project reassurance and authority and safety. "Where is home? Is it near here? Did you wander off from a campsite? Did your car break down somewhere?" I knew even as I asked that there were no campsites for miles. No broken-down cars on the shoulder that I'd passed. Nothing. Just road and trees and darkness. The kid didn't answer that question directly. Instead, they took a small step towards the truck. Then another. Slow, deliberate steps. My hand tensed on the door handle, ready to open it, to offer. What? A ride? Shelter? I didn't know. I didn't have a plan beyond helping, beyond doing the right thing. "It's cold out here," I said, stating what should have been obvious. "You must be freezing. You should get in. We can get you warm, and I can call for help when we get to a spot with a signal." My CB radio was useless, had been for the last hour, just static and ghost voices. My phone had shown no service since I'd entered this stretch, the signal bars dropping away like abandoned hope. The kid stopped about 5 feet from my passenger door, still in that pale, thin pajama-like outfit that looked more like a costume than actual clothing. Barefoot on the sharp gravel, on ground that had to be cold enough to hurt. They should be shivering, teeth chattering, crying from pain and fear and cold. They were doing none of those things. "Can you help me?" the kid asked. The voice was still small, but there was a different inflection to it now. Less flat. A hint of something else. Pleading, maybe? Need. "Yeah, of course, I can help you," I said, meaning it, wanting to mean it. "That's why I stopped. But I need you to help me understand. Where are your parents? How did you get all the way out here?" The kid tilted their head. A jerky, unnatural little movement, like a bird examining something it might eat. "They're waiting. At home." Okay, good. "And where's home?" "Which direction?" "Up the road. Back the way I came." I gestured vaguely up and down the empty highway, hoping for something, any information. The kid didn't point down the road in either direction. They made a small, subtle gesture with their head, a little nod, towards the trees, towards the impenetrable wall of darkness that was the woods lining the highway. "In there," the kid said, simply, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. My stomach clenched, a physical sensation like something grabbing my guts and twisting. "In the woods? Your home is in the woods? Like a cabin? A ranger station? Lost," the kid repeated, as if that explained everything, as if it was the answer to every question. "Trying to find the path. It's dark. Can't see." "Yeah, it's very dark," I agreed, my eyes scanning the tree line, looking for any sign of a path, a trail, a break in the trees. Any indication that humans had ever walked there. Nothing. Just dense, old-growth forest. The kind of place you could get lost in for days, even in daylight. The kind of place where people went in and never came out. "Listen, kid, I really don't think." "Can you come out?" the kid interrupted, their voice taking on that pleading tone again. "Help me look? It's not far. I can't see it from here. If you came with me, just a little way, we could find it together." Every rational thought in my head, every survival instinct I possessed, screamed in unison. Get out of the truck? In the middle of nowhere, in the pitch dark, with this strange child who wasn't acting like any child I'd ever encountered, who wanted me to go into those woods that looked like the mouth of hell itself. No, absolutely not. That was how people disappeared. That was how missing persons reports got filed. But the kid looked so small, so vulnerable, standing there in thin pajamas, barefoot in the cold. If there was even a tiny chance they were telling the truth, that their house was just a little way in, that they were genuinely lost and scared and trying to hide it. I don't think that's a good idea, buddy," I said, trying to sound gentle but firm. "It's dangerous in there at night. For both of us. Wild animals, uneven ground, we could both get lost. Best thing is for you to hop in here with me, where it's warm and safe. We'll drive until we get a signal, and then we'll call the police or the forest rangers. They can help find your home properly. They have equipment, dogs, people who know these woods." The kid just stood there, that blank, unreadable face fixed on me, silent, staring, the weight of that gaze growing heavier. "But it's right there," they insisted, their voice a little more insistent now, a little harder. "Just a little way. I can almost see it. If you just step out, the light from your door would help. Please." My skin was crawling now, every hair on my arms standing up despite the cold. There was something profoundly wrong with this scenario. The way they were trying to coax me out, specific and persistent. The complete lack of normal emotional response. The pajamas that looked wrong, more like a costume, a lure. The bare feet that should be bleeding. The woods that felt like they were watching, waiting. I looked closer at the kid, trying to pierce that strange vagueness around their features, trying to see them clearly despite the bright lights. My headlights were on full, but it was like they absorbed the light rather than reflected it. Their eyes. I still couldn't really see their eyes. Just dark hollows, empty spaces where eyes should be. "I really think you should get in the truck," I said, my voice firmer now, leaving less room for argument. It's warmer in here. Safer. We can figure this out together, but not out there. The kid took another step closer. They were almost at my running board now, close enough that I could have reached out and touched them if I'd opened the door. Please, they said, and that reedy voice took on a new quality. My leg hurts. I can't walk much further. If you could just help me a little. Just to the path. You're strong. You could help me. My internal conflict was raging, tearing me in two directions. My trucker instincts, honed by years of seeing weird stuff at 3 a.m. and hearing weirder stories at truck stops from old-timers with haunted eyes, were blaring warnings like a klaxon. Danger. Trap. Predator. Run. But the human part, the part that had been raised to help people, to be kind, to not be the asshole who drives away when someone needs help, was still there, still arguing, still trying to convince me I was being paranoid. I was tired. So damn tired. Hours of driving, hours of fighting sleep, and now this. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe this was all some bizarre misunderstanding, and in the morning light, it would make perfect sense, and I'd feel terrible for being so suspicious. I squinted, trying to see past the kid, towards the tree line they'd indicated. Was there a faint trail I was missing? A flicker of light deep in the woods, maybe from a cabin window? A sign of civilization I couldn't quite make out? No, nothing. Just blackness. Solid, unyielding, hungry blackness. And then I saw it. It wasn't something I saw clearly at first. It was more like an anomaly, a wrongness, a disturbance in the darkness behind the kid that my brain couldn't quite process. The kid was standing with their back mostly to the woods, facing my truck. Behind them, the darkness of the forest was absolute. Or it should have been. But there was something connected to them. Something that stretched from the small of their back, from under the thin pajama top, and disappeared into the deeper shadows of the trees. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a weird shadow cast by my headlights hitting them at an odd angle. Maybe a rope they were dragging? A piece of clothing snagged on a branch. Maybe a shadow from their arms that I was misinterpreting in my exhausted state. I leaned forward, gripping the steering wheel, trying to get a clearer view. The kid was still talking, their voice a low, persistent murmur that was starting to grate on my nerves. It's not far. Please, just help me. I'm so cold my parents are worried. But I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. I was focused on that thing behind them. On the impossibility I was seeing. It wasn't a rope. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't clothing. It was a tube. A long, dark, thick tube. It seemed to emerge directly from the kid's lower back, impossibly, seamlessly, like it grew out of them. It was dark, matte black, like a strip of the night itself given physical form, and it snaked away from the child, maybe 10, 15 feet, before disappearing into the inky blackness between two thick pine trunks. It wasn't rigid like a pipe. It seemed to have a slight, almost imperceptible flexibility, like a massive, sluggish umbilical cord made of shadow and nightmare. It didn't reflect any light from my headlamps. It just absorbed it, drank it in, like it was a hole in reality. My breath hitched in my throat. My blood, which had been cold before, now felt like it had frozen solid in my veins. This wasn't just wrong. This was impossible, unnatural, against every law of nature and physics and reality that I'd ever known. The kid was still trying to coax me, their voice taking on an edge of impatience now. Are you going to help me? It's just there. You're so close. Just a few steps. Please. My voice, when I finally found it, was barely a whisper, rough with terror. I couldn't take my eyes off that appendage. That tether. That proof that this was not a child. Kid, what is that? Behind you. The kid flinched. Not a big movement. Just a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening of their small frame. Like I'd said something I wasn't supposed to. Like I'd broken a rule I didn't know existed. Their head, which had been tilted pleadingly towards me, straightened. The blankness on their face seemed to solidify. Harden. The pretense was cracking. What's what? They asked, their voice suddenly devoid of that pleading tone. It was flat again. Colder. Dead. That thing. I stammered, pointing with a shaking finger, my hand trembling so hard I could barely hold it steady. Coming out of your back. Going into the woods. What the hell is that? The kid didn't turn to look. They didn't need to. They knew what I was talking about. Their gaze, those dark, unseen eyes and those hollow sockets, bored into me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen. "It's nothing," they said, and the voice was different now, still coming from that small frame, but with an undertone that didn't belong. "You're seeing things. You're tired. Remember? You said it yourself. You're exhausted. Hallucinating." They were using my own earlier rationalization against me, throwing my words back at me. And somehow that was more terrifying than anything else, the intelligence behind it, the manipulation. "No," I said, my voice gaining a tremor of conviction born of sheer terror. "No, I'm not. I see it. It's right there. It's connected to you. What are you?" The kid was silent for a long moment. The crickets had stopped chirping. The wind had died down completely. An unnatural stillness fell over the scene, like the whole world was holding its breath. Even the trees seemed to lean in closer, listening. Then, the kid's face began to change. It wasn't a dramatic transformation, no tearing skin or morphing features like you'd see in a horror movie. It was far more subtle, and far more terrifying for that subtlety. The blankness didn't leave, but it sharpened. The pale skin seemed to tighten over the bones, pulling taut, making the face look almost skull-like. The areas where the eyes were, those dark smudges, seemed to deepen, to become more shadowed, more intense, like pits that went down forever. And a flicker of something ancient and utterly alien passed across their features. It wasn't human anger. It wasn't human anything. It was something older, colder, and infinitely more patient, something that had waited in the dark for so long that patience was its natural state. And I had annoyed it. The air in my cab suddenly felt thick, heavy, hard to breathe, like the atmosphere had changed composition. My lungs burned. "Just come out of the truck," the kid said, and the voice, oh God, the voice. It wasn't the small, reedy voice of a child anymore. It was deeper, resonant, with a strange, grating undertone, like stones grinding together deep underground, like tectonic plates shifting, like the earth itself groaning in pain. It was coming from that small frame, but it was impossibly large, impossibly old, carrying the weight of eons. It vibrated in my chest, in my bones, in my teeth. "Come out. Now." The command was absolute, imperative, the voice of something that had never been denied, that couldn't conceive of being refused. My hand, which had been hovering near the gear stick, now gripped it like a lifeline, like it was the only solid thing in a world that had gone mad. My other hand fumbled for the ignition key, which I'd stupidly left in. "What are you?" I choked out, staring at the monstrous thing wearing a child's form like an ill-fitting costume, at the dark, pulsating tube that was its anchor to the shadows, its umbilical cord to hell itself. The kid's head tilted again, that jerky, unnatural movement that no human neck should make. The expression on its face, if you could call it that, was one of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Contempt. Like I was a particularly stupid insect it had failed to swat. Like I was prey that had somehow developed inconvenient awareness. And then it spoke, in that same terrible, resonant, grinding voice that scraped against the inside of my skull like rusty nails. The words it said are burned into my memory, seared there with the kind of permanence that trauma creates. I hear them in my nightmares. I'll hear them until the day I die. "Why?" It rasped, the sound seeming to vibrate through the truck itself, through the air, through reality. "The FUCK are humans smarter now." That was it. That one sentence. The sheer, cosmic frustration in it. The implication of past encounters, of easier prey, of successful hunts that had gone on for who knows how long. The utter alien nature of it. The confirmation that this had happened before, many times, and that once upon a time, it had worked. People had gotten out. People had followed. People had disappeared. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I didn't weigh my options or consider consequences. Primal fear, the kind that bypasses all higher brain function, the kind that's coded into our DNA from millions of years of being hunted, took over completely. My hand twisted the key. The diesel engine roared back to life, a sudden, Violent explosion of sound in the horrifying stillness, shattering the unnatural quiet like a gunshot. The thing, actually recoiled. A small, jerky step back, like it hadn't expected that. Like machines were still strange to it, still newer than it was. The expression, that awful, tightened, ancient look, intensified into something that might have been rage. I slammed the gear stick into drive, the transmission protesting, metal grinding against metal. My foot stomped on the accelerator, pressing it all the way to the floor, demanding everything the engine could give. The truck lurched forward, tires spinning on the gravel for a terrifying second, loose stones flying, before they bit into the asphalt with a screech of rubber. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I stared straight ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The whole cab was vibrating around me, the engine screaming as I pushed it past any reasonable speed. The truck surged forward, gaining speed with agonizing slowness. Tons of metal and cargo don't accelerate quickly. For a horrible, stretched-out moment, I imagined that tube thing whipping out, trying to snag the trailer, wrapping around the axles, pulling me back, dragging me and my rig backwards into those woods. I imagined that small figure, with its ancient, terrible voice, somehow keeping pace despite my speed, running alongside with inhuman grace. I imagined it climbing onto my trailer, crawling over it like a spider, making its way to my cab. I risked a glance in my driver's side mirror, just a fraction of a second. It was standing there, on the shoulder, unmoving. The headlights of my departing truck cast its small silhouette into sharp relief against the darkness. And behind it, the dark tube was still visible, that thick, obscene cord snaking back into the endless night of the forest. It didn't seem to be retracting or moving. It just was. Tethered. Anchored. The thing didn't pursue. It didn't chase. It just stood and watched me go. And that, somehow, was almost worse than if it had come after me. The sheer confidence. The patience. The knowledge that it didn't need to chase. Like it knew there would be others. Like it knew that somewhere, sometime, another tired driver would stop. Another kind person would try to help. Another human would make the mistake of thinking they were dealing with a child. Or maybe it was just annoyed that this particular attempt had failed, that the old methods didn't work as well as they used to, that humans had gotten smarter, and that was inconvenient. I drove. I don't know for how long. I just drove. My foot was welded to the floor. The engine screamed in protest, the needle on the speedometer climbing far past any legal or safe limit for a rig that size, on a road that dark, with a full trailer behind me. I didn't care about safety. I didn't care about laws. I didn't care about my cargo, or my rig, or my job. I just needed distance. I needed miles between me and that thing. I needed to be anywhere but there. The image of that thing, that child shape with its dark umbilical to the woods, and that voice, that awful, grinding voice asking its horrifying question, was burned onto the inside of my eyelids. Every time I blinked, I saw it. Every time I breathed, I heard it. I must have driven for an hour, maybe more, at speeds that should have gotten me killed or arrested or both, before the adrenaline started to fade, burned through, and used up. It was replaced by a bone-deep, shaking exhaustion that was more profound than any fatigue I'd ever known. Deeper than physical tiredness. Soul tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from encountering something that shouldn't exist, something that proves the world is darker and stranger and more terrifying than you ever imagined. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely keep the wheel straight. I realized tears were streaming down my face, not from sadness, but from sheer, unadulterated terror and relief, and the release of emotions I hadn't known I was holding back. My breath was coming in hitching gasps. When the first hint of dawn started to gray the eastern sky, painting the horizon with weak light, and my phone finally beeped, indicating a single bar of service, I pulled over at the first wide spot I could find. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to put the truck in park. I practically fell out of the cab, stumbling on weak legs, and immediately vomited onto the gravel until there was nothing left but dry heaves. I sat there on the cold ground, shaking, hugging myself, for a long time, watching the sun come up, watching light return to the world, watching normal reality reassert itself. I tried to convince myself that it had been a dream, a hallucination brought on by exhaustion and isolation and too many hours behind the wheel. But I knew it wasn't. The detail of that tube, that umbilical cord of darkness, the voice, ancient and frustrated and utterly inhuman. The question that implied so much. You don't hallucinate something that specific, that coherent, that utterly alien. You don't imagine something that feels that real. I never reported it. Who would I report it to? The local sheriff? The state police? What would I say? Officer, I saw a little kid who was actually an ancient cosmic horror tethered to the woods by a nightmare umbilical cord, and it got mad because I didn't want to be its dinner. They'd have breathalyzed me, drug-tested me, sent me for a mandatory psych evaluation. I'd never work again. My family would worry. My friends would look at me differently. So I said nothing. I finished that run on autopilot, my mind elsewhere, my body going through the motions. Dropped the load. Drove my rig back to the yard. And then I walked into the office and quit. I told them I was burned out, needed a break, wanted to spend more time at home. They tried to convince me to stay, offered me different routes, more pay, better schedules, all the things they thought would help. I just shook my head. I couldn't explain. I just couldn't do it anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that kid, that tube, those woods. Every dark road felt like a trap, a hunting ground. Every shadow looked like it might be hiding something ancient and patient and hungry. I found a local job, something that keeps me home at night, that keeps me in populated areas, that keeps me surrounded by light and people and safety. I don't drive in remote areas anymore if I can possibly help it. Especially not at night. Especially not alone. I still have nightmares. Several times a week, I wake up sweating, heart pounding, having dreamed of that pale face and that grinding voice. Sometimes, when I'm very tired, driving home late from somewhere, I'll see a flicker at the edge of my vision on the side of the road, and my heart will try to beat its way out of my chest. I'll white-knuckle the steering wheel and keep driving, not stopping, not slowing, until I'm home with the doors locked. I don't know what that thing was. I've read everything I can find. Ancient folklore, modern cryptids, alien theories, interdimensional entities. Nothing quite fits. Maybe it's an alien, something that crash-landed here millennia ago and has been hunting us ever since. Maybe it's a demon, something that was here before us and resents our presence. Maybe it's something else entirely, something that doesn't fit into our neat little categories and taxonomies, something for which we don't even have a name. All I know is that it's out there, somewhere on that stretch of road or others like it. And it's patient, infinitely patient. And it seems to have learned, over the years, that its old tricks aren't as effective as they used to be. Why the fuck are humans smarter now? That question haunts me more than anything else. It implies they weren't always. It implies that, once upon a time, we were easier. That maybe, just maybe, people like me, tired and alone on dark roads, used to just step out of the cab when asked. Used to follow strange children into dark woods without question. Used to trust and help and not question the wrongness they were seeing. And were never seen again. How many missing persons, I wonder? How many unsolved disappearances on remote highways? How many people who just vanished without a trace, their vehicles found abandoned, no sign of struggle, no logical explanation? How many of them stopped for something that looked like a child in need? So, if you're ever driving one of those long, lonely stretches of road, deep in the night, hours from anywhere, and you see something you can't explain, maybe just keep driving. Maybe being smarter now means knowing when not to stop, knowing when to ignore that little voice telling you to help, because what's asking for help might not be what it seems. Knowing that sometimes, the most human thing you can do is trust your instincts when they scream at you to run. Stay safe out there. Watch the shoulders. Trust your gut. And for God's sake, stay on the well-lit roads. Because they're out there, waiting, patient, hungry, and they remember when we were easier prey.